diversity and different perspectives within our classrooms. You'll have access to all these amazing teachers, and I think it's really a great opportunity to get involved with this international community where you're constantly stimulated with all these different activities. Hello, my name is Kun. I'm 16 years old from Thailand, and I'm a full-time student at CGA. I chose CGA because of the COVID pandemic. We had to find a place that would accept me and support me while I was online, and CGA was perfect for that.
When we first joined CGA, we didn't have any expectation at all. But what are the transformation that we have seen in Kun? Without CGA, we would never have known of these opportunities.
I think the first difference is definitely the class size. I think CGA's class size is about 5 to 10 people. This has really helped me as it just makes sure that everyone really knows each other, and we're constantly going at a pace that's always comfortable to everyone within the classroom. The environment of CGA is one where there's always something going on. I'm the co-leader of the Economics Club, a member of the Web Development Club, and the Scholar Society. I regularly speak with all my friends within Slack, things both related to and outside of the classroom. We also help each other organize events and clubs, so there's quite an active social scene within the school. I've managed to make the most of that environment. I think there's always been new activities, competitions, courses that I can take and either enter something international relations related or alternatively do some research within history and politics. Mr. Yates prepared me for the Mohammediana's social fiction design competition where I was a top applicant. I won the VEX Robotics Competition Nationals. I think with the help of my parents and my teachers, I've largely been able to maintain enough time to do studying, but at the same time, I'm not feeling burnt out. During the afternoon, I mainly focus on homework, research, or any general activities that I might have, as it just allows me to really explore some of my areas of interest without some of the classroom pressures. Otherwise, I've also recently picked up the guitar, which I really love just because it allows me to play some of my favorite songs. And so overall, it's been a very positive experience. If you feel like you're someone who would like to get yourself involved in different activities and different competitions or different celebrations of ideas, CGA is international, it's inspirational, and it's interesting.
CGA is totally a school that can become a leader. It's exceeded our expectation. If you feel that your children would like to have customized teaching where opportunities arise all the time, I think CGA is the place for you.
So if you feel that you're academically motivated and you want to get involved, the learning is absolutely wonderful. You'll have access to really great friends and it will be a great experience. Join me in the global classrooms at CGA.
Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar called An Alternative Path to Your Child's Education. This is actually the third time that we're running this topic because it's actually our most popular topic for families across Asia who are seeking, an alternative schooling solution for the unique needs of their child. I'm Peter, I'm the Regional Director here at CGA. I'm managing our admissions team for Asia. And within our region, we do get a lot of families, particularly from places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Taiwan, and Vietnam, joining us for a more personalized education experience. That's actually me in Singapore, where we held a student meetup. This is a very important aspect of our school, and our team has a lineup of student meetups across Asia upcoming this September. Bit about me, I've spent the last decade in the education space advising thousands of families across Asia on highly selective university applications, My students have been accepted by all 8 Ivy League institutions, Stanford, MIT, Oxford, and Cambridge. I'm actually Korean, grew up in New Zealand, and now I'm back based in Seoul. All right, on the agenda today, you'll be with us for about the next 45 to 50 minutes. I'll be giving a very brief overview of CGA and how it works for families with children with special education needs. Then I'll be handing it off to Anna from Alliance Counselling, who I'm very fortunate to have us join, who'll be sharing her, background and expertise on the challenges and unique needs facing SEND students within Asia. Then she'll hand it over to Jane, who is our inclusion manager here at CGA, who'll be sharing how CGA as a school, our teachers, the way that we've designed our school, how it supports SEND students, and we'll wrap up with a bit of Q&A. All right, so before we get started, the easiest way for families across Asia to contact us is through WhatsApp. So whether you want to, schedule a call with us or have any questions during or after our webinar, please scan the QR code on the screen and we'll be here to help. Awesome. So let's get started with a quick poll. May I ask, how old is your child currently, so that we could tailor, some of the talking points throughout this presentation? And as a school, CJ did start as a high school, but now we offer a middle years program and a primary program. So students ranging from as early as 7 up until 17 can enroll either part-time or full-time with CGA. So I see, the majority of the audience have children, I think already in high school or about to enter high school, with a few under 10 as well. Interesting. All right, thanks for that. Let's get started. So about Crimson Global Academy, the easiest way for me to describe it is that it is a top-ranked international school, but it's online. What's unique about our school is we don't just offer one curricula. We have 2 pathways consisting of the international GCSE and A levels and the US diploma and advanced placement pathway. Because something that we strongly believe as a school is personalization. Students should pick the curriculum depending on their academic interests, their learning preferences, and ultimately their university goals, which may actually change throughout the course of their journey in primary, middle, and high school. As a result, we've been very fortunate enough to earn the WASC accreditation, which is the highest level of accreditation available to international schools in the world, and we've actually received the highest tenure of 6 years. We've also been ranked the #3 best online high school in America, and also the #25 best private school in the whole of America out of 4,990 schools. So we're really proud of our accreditations and awards, because this helps our students get recognized by world universities once they apply. Okay. Since we started, we've grown quite rapidly, especially in Asia. So to date, we have just over 2,000 students now. Half of them are part-time, so they already attend their current school and take extra subjects or classes with CGA. But we're really seeing the demand for full-time, because that's how families can leverage the full advantages of our online schooling. On average, we have 10 to 12 students, which is typically half or even a third the typical class size found in international and local schools throughout Asia. I think when choosing a school, it's important to understand the philosophy that underpins the way that they run the school and offer their academics. The first one is we believe in ability-based, not age-based learning. Because what we've seen time and time and again is one student may have different academic abilities and interest levels across their subjects, right? So placing them in exactly the same level across all of their subjects, simply based on what day they were born, we feel doesn't make much sense. The second one is, as an online school, we do believe that live, real-time teaching, rather than just watching a pre-recorded lesson or having your camera off, for example, during COVID remote learning, we believe that live classes is the most effective and most engaging way to teach content online. The third one is we are not just about academics, because we feel that education and schooling needs to inspire students to explore their interests and passions outside of their academic subjects. And I'll touch on that at the end of tonight's webinar. And again, high school is not really the end goal for our students, right? They want to progress onto the next stage of their life, whether it's attending, a top university or an institution that just fits them a little bit better. Interestingly, we have some students pursuing alternative pathways, whether it's pre-professional, whether it's a trade school or becoming a professional athlete. Awesome. A little bit about our online lessons. The way that we've designed it is that it is a front of the classroom experience, right? So if you think about a traditional classroom, some students sit at the front of the classroom, some at the back, depending on how they feel about that subject and their teacher. At CGA, our students are all sitting at the front, deeply engaged in the class from the very beginning until the end. And I think what makes our environment really awesome is that it's a safe space for students to really showcase their intellectual interest. They're not afraid to ask questions during class time, and I think the classmates, provide the safe space for each other. Awesome. So I'm going to hand it over to Anna to introduce Alliance Counselling, a bit about herself, and the needs facing SEND students in Asia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Peter. So just to tell you quickly where I'm from. So I work at Alliance Counselling, which is in Singapore, 35 of us, and we provide supports to men, women, couples, parents, children, teenagers, and families. We also do, we do educational institution partnering, supervision, workshops, and psychological assessments. So we opened in 2009 in Singapore, and we've supported clients from 60 different cultures, and we speak 12 languages. So that's where I work. And then a bit about me. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm South African. I lived in Singapore for 20 years, and now I currently live in London. I've got 21 years of experience in social work and counselling in Singapore and the UK. I did my undergraduate studies in South Africa, and then on to my graduate studies at the National University of Singapore, and then Masters in Counselling from the University of South Australia. So I work at Alliance, but I used to work at United World College in Singapore, the Dover campus, as a counsellor. So I'll share a tiny bit about that in a minute, and I'm really interested in supporting teenagers and young adults. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about how learning differences impact the academic success of your children. And we've got 4 different areas that I'm going to be discussing. I'm just touching on them really briefly, but I just want to give an overview, and then we'll go into some other points in a few minutes. But I'm assuming because of you attending this webinar that you have a child maybe with special educational needs. And SEN usually refers to like an academic or a physical difference, but actually I'm going to touch on a little bit what it looks like for your child if they have emotional challenges as well. So let me start by talking about autism spectrum disorder, ASD. So a child with ASD, who's high functioning, or if it's mild, may actually be able to attend a mainstream school. However, these are the challenges that they may face. So sensory overload, too much noise and light, communication and socialization. So it's really hard to understand nonverbal cues. Emotional regulation, these kids can get overwhelmed and need to withdraw or escape, sometimes ending up, for example, in the bathroom, which is really not ideal. They also have a hyper-focus or interest, which is definitely a gift, but this can be really hard to manage in a mainstream school where a teacher has a curriculum that they need to follow. Let me just talk a little bit about ADHD now, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So ADHD kids jump between tasks. They don't finish tasks. There's a task avoidance of things that they don't like to do. They can be disruptive if they have the hyperactivity part, as well as impulsive. Executive functioning issues. In fact, all of our children who have learning support challenges, most of them have this executive functioning challenge, which is like time management, organization, plus a struggle to take tests in traditional settings. In fact, this encompasses all of our learning support kids too. So they need accommodations, perhaps a laptop use, a quiet room, brain breaks, an ability to leave the classroom. Just a quick personal experience from me. My 15-year-old son, he has ADHD. And we used to live in Singapore, but he only actually got diagnosed back here in the UK. It was very, very difficult for him in a big mainstream school. He was actually at UWC. It was really tough. He's at a smaller school here where there's a very personalized learning support program, which is actually how come he's able to cope. Now we're just going to talk a bit about dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. It's very common for students to have a combination of any of these learning differences. So dyspraxia and dyspraxic kids, this is a challenge with handwriting, spelling, and grammar, and fine and gross motor skills. Why do these kids struggle at a mainstream school? Because you have to move around. You've got a real campus that you have to navigate, and this can be very difficult. Also, like fine motor skills, like using scissors, and subjects like design and technology, very challenging. Dyscalculia, challenges working with numbers like maths, but it can also be subjects like science. Kids like this can get lost also in a mainstream school because they're not likely to ask for help, in a maths classroom, feeling really self-conscious, not wanting to put up their hand, and can be quite humiliating. Dyslexia, loads and loads of kids with dyslexia, and it affects many aspects of learning, actually. It's not just reading. It can also be writing, comprehension, processing speed, memorization. Again, a bit from my personal experience, my older son has dyslexia, and he also struggled at United World College. We picked this up at about 5 years old, and it always affected his confidence. He felt different. He was in learning support, but he didn't like the stigma of this. And quite frankly, this can be a hallmark of any of our children with learning challenges. They can feel quite lost in a big system, or they can get individualized support if they're lucky enough to get learning support, but then sometimes feel like they're self-conscious and they don't want to be different to their peers. Now, just talking a little bit about emotional differences, so anxiety and depression. So all of these learning differences I've just talked about briefly often lead to our children having some anxiety and depression. It's almost a given if you have a neurodiverse child that they're going to have this, in fact, at some point during their school years. I sometimes think we overlook this and we don't acknowledge it enough. And I think it's really important as parents to keep an eye on our child's mental health. Like I mentioned earlier, kids want to be accepted more than anything. And with a SEN child, that's often not the case. Our own son, the dyslexic son, really struggled with anxiety and depression and some school refusal actually as well. So I've been through what you guys maybe are experiencing. We've also come across the fact that our children with SEN needs are often called lazy by teachers, maybe even sometimes us as parents. And I found this actually really the case. Yes, they may procrastinate, but that's often just because they don't really understand the task. So this low self-esteem is something we really have to keep an eye on. Hard to parent as well, right? Lots of frustration for us. But I just guess I want to say, if you're getting met with a lot of headaches, stomach aches, school refusal, please do pay attention to this. Really it can be a cry for help. I'm going to move on to the next area, which is why mainstream schools. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. We're going to have a poll now. What's the biggest challenge that your child is currently facing in the school? So please let us know what that is. Thank you. You can just click on as many as fit your child. Do we have any answers to share? Let's have a look. There we are. So the highest seems to be lack of teacher understanding and training. I shall be touching on that now. Anxiety, yep. Social challenges, okay. Lack of teacher support, curriculum, yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody, for sharing that with us. So I'm going to move on to why mainstream schools in Asia might not always meet the needs of our SEN students. So today we're looking mostly at schools in Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Taiwan, a little bit Vietnam. But, I totally understand these are very different countries, but my research has shown that, in fact, there are similarities in the education system. So I'm just going to generalize here, please forgive me. But a main issue is stigma. So there's a stigma around learning differences, and obviously there's a pressure to conform. Many reasons, but one of them is because there are very, very few truly integrated and inclusive schools in Southeast or East Asia. So usually these schools follow a similar model where SEN kids attend a mainstream school unless they have very severe or multiple disabilities, and then they're placed in special needs schools. So in Singapore, for example, like Dover Court International is one of the very few true all ability schools. But a few years ago, they introduced the International Baccalaureate, the IB, which is actually notoriously difficult. So that seems to be a strange decision on their behalf. In general, international schools usually actually have more learning accessibility. Not always the case, but then trying to get your child into an international school is obviously really difficult. There are tests and assessments to take. A neurodiverse child may not pass these. Also long waiting lists, and also really expensive. So in mainstream local schools, most of them have a teach to test system. And it's really, really fast-paced, and this can be very tough for SEN kids. There's academic rigor and really high standards in all of the countries that you're dialing in from. Singapore and Hong Kong are really known for this in particular. So there's also, in all of these systems, there's a lot riding on tests, tests, exams, results. There have been various studies that I've been able to access and surveys done in countries. For example, in Singapore and Taiwan, they've measured the stress on both parents and students around exam time, and it's much, much higher than the world average. Another issue is that the number of students in each class, so the average size in Taiwan and Singapore is 33, Hong Kong and Thailand is 30, Vietnam can be up to 40 kids per class. So if your child has a learning difference, how are they going to keep up in a class of that size? And finally, lack of SEN training for teachers. So in my research, I could not find any information about the percentage of teachers in Hong Kong, Thailand, or Taiwan, or Vietnam that have had SEN training. Just not out there. I found a report released by the MOE in Singapore in July 2024 that said 10 to 15% of teachers have SEN training. It's something. Just a note from myself too, just to share with you, being a school counselor at United World College, which is a high fee paying international school, very good reputation. But there was one learning support teacher for the whole of high school, which is 1,000 children. So it's just impossible to access learning support. And in the counselling department, there were 4 of us, 4 counsellors attending to almost 3,000 kids for like social and emotional needs. So, if that's at UWC, just other schools don't have it, just don't have the resources. So I want to move on to the next section, which is as a parent, how can you support your SEN child? Obviously, trying your best to be supportive, right? And catch them when they succeed and celebrate their efforts and successes. Routine and structure at home is really vital. I just also want to try and reassure you to put down your worries about your child, that their future is going to be so bleak. There are stories of so many highly successful people who have learning differences. Just a couple to mention: Albert Einstein and Richard Branson, both dyslexic. Greta Thunberg and Bill Gates, both autism, and Winston Churchill and Walt Disney, for example, had ADHD. Also, just please pay attention to being careful about trying to put your child into a box and a belief that they have to be in a mainstream school to thrive. The system really may not work for them, and to be able to pay attention to that as a parent is a very valuable gift. Please think about getting an educational psychology report done. I'll discuss that a bit in a minute, a little bit more. And just to educate yourself, so embracing the differences and learning about the differences that your child has. SEN kids have got many, many gifts, high intelligence, special interests and talents. They can be sociable, high verbal skills. So encourage their passions. They need us. And advocate for your child, right? Push for accommodations at school and support. Model your own self-regulation, show them what you do or what you need when you're feeling stretched or overwhelmed. and like apologize if we mess up, we can do that. And talking openly about neurodivergence to help like literally normalize that. And finally, just take care of you, because this is exhausting and your own self-care is crucial. So next section, please, and sort of last section from me. I just want to share these resources with you for a minute. If you have your phones or cameras, just take a photograph. There are lots and lots of resources out there. So I just chose my top, whatever they are, 6 or 7 here. So I hope these are helpful for all of you. Okay, we can move on to my last section, which is just a little bit about, aside from you guys, that who can help. Your school learning support department, if you have one. So please just, just find out a few things, like how many kids there are per learning support teacher, how many lessons per week. I mean, this is also questions to ask if you're considering moving schools. Does the school take your child out of class or provide in-class support? And are the teachers specifically trained to teach children with learning differences? School counselor, does your school have one, of course? How many kids per counselor? How easy is it to access regular sessions? And what training has the counselor had in years of experience? Educational psychologist. So please, this is what I mentioned earlier about getting an ed psych report done. It's a very thorough assessment that's conducted by an educational psychologist. And this identifies your child's strengths and challenges and the areas where they need support. And this report includes how you as a parent, but also very importantly, how a school can help your child, and particularly with accommodations, like I mentioned earlier, laptop usage, etc. Tutors, just as a little note here, maybe your child needs a tutor, maybe one trained in SEN support. Psychiatrist, does your child need medication? If they have ADHD, do they need stimulants? If you're okay to do that, or SSRIs if they have depression or anxiety. Executive functioning coach can be a very useful person in your child's life. They provide practical skills to help support the time management system of your child's brain. And finally, an external counselor, just to help your child with anxiety or depression that may accompany being neurodivergent. So that's from me. I'm going to now hand you over to Jane from CGA. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all here with us this evening. So first of all, a little bit about myself. I have a passion for inclusion. It's been my career for 27 years, 25 of them as a Senko or head of inclusion. But before that, I worked as a teaching assistant. And all my life, I have lived in a neurodiverse family. So being of the older generation, we wouldn't have diagnoses, but all my family are very neurodiverse. My children and grandchildren are as well diagnosed. So it's a real true passion, and definitely I'm in the right career. I believe part of my passion is we are all different. Neurodiversity means every brain is different. And where I would like to be, and where I feel we are, are with CGA, that we're all different, and we change the way that we teach to meet the needs of our children, rather than children or learners changing the way that they learn. So I think that's why I enjoy CGA, because it's very diverse and unique. So the support that we provide, obviously there's a dedicated Senko. I am full-time. I work with children who are gifted and talented, have medical needs, emotional needs, and SEND, or a mixture. So we have a number of children who are twice exceptionally able, that are neurodiverse and have gifted and talent. We have a dedicated school counsellor, Jan, who's exceptional. We can introduce you to her if needed along the way. And our teachers do have training. So for example, the Greenwich side, so because we have two sides of the world, so the Greenwich staff in London are all having training on the 28th to the 30th of August, all about the the neurodiverse classroom. So our aim is that every classroom will have consistent non-negotiables, that students will go from classroom to classroom and they will feel that they belong, and they will feel that they're celebrated, and they will be able to learn to the best of their capacity. So that training is happening at the end of August. We also have lots of training for like how access arrangements are best trained with children, lots of different things. But teachers are trained, and we have staff briefing every week where we, just do little snapshots, sort of information giving as well. Next slide, please. So just a little poll, just so I can understand where your interests are. So if you could just say very quickly what or if your child has been diagnosed with anything, or potentially. So if they haven't had a diagnosis but you feel it's along those routes, please tick those boxes. And you can again tick more than one, because for example, somebody can have ADHD, autism and anxiety and dyslexia all at the same time. I'll just have a look at those in the chat. I'll just wait to see they come through on the chat. Okay, anything come through on the chat? Okay. ADHD, autism, dyslexia, anxiety, depression. Yeah, so across the board there. Brilliant. And I think that the methods of diagnosis have improved so much over the last 10 years that where diagnoses weren't possible, we are seeing many more children have appropriate diagnosis, and therefore us as educators and families can help meet their needs much easier. So let's have a look. Let me just get rid of this. So we do have a SEND register, but we like to say inclusion register. So we don't say SEND anymore with our school. We have individual educational needs and abilities. And what that does is it does incorporate anybody with an additional need, such as SEND, medical needs, or gifted and talented or emotional health and well-being needs. Okay, so just give you an example. They may go under the SEND element if they have evidence of a diagnosis. We use psychological reports, in-house assessments, might do observations. So we pop into the online class, see how they're working, family views, pupil views, data. Are they progressing? Because you can have an additional need that's not a barrier, so then they wouldn't need to be on the register. We set IEP goals, but we celebrate strengths, areas of interest, and we have personalised support plans. And we are moving now over to every child at CGA will have a learner plan, no matter what their need is. So whether they've got an additional need or whether it's just I'm behind a little bit in history, everybody's going to have an individual learner plan. And the support strategies, again, they're different for every single child. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is an example of our IEP. It has changed because we've just moved over to a new data system, but it includes all the same thing. And this actually looks much nicer than what I see on my data screen. So for an individual education plan or a learner plan, we have all the generic information, date of birth, and we have, what the primary need is there a secondary need, a tertiary need? Some children have 4 different needs. We also look at hobbies and interests. So we like to know that so teachers can plan lessons to sort of help to engage and stimulate curiosity. So if you're into race cars and you're doing physics, can you link that? Or maths, can you link that? We always start with strengths. To me, again, that's really important because having ADHD, for example, there are superpowers. I come from a family full of people, children with ADHD, and we can multitask. Yes, we do lots of different jobs, but they all get finished in the end. And so, you know, we have high expectations. So we are able to multitask. We're able to think of more than one thing at a time. So we have superpowers. So I like to celebrate those strengths. I think that's a real valuable part of our individual education plan. What we also look at is we look at how do we support students in class? So what things can teachers do to help students? And we get that from psychology reports, from classroom observations, from the students. We always send a list of questions to students, or I'll meet with them online and say, what helps you? Families. Or we might look where things are working really well and ask the teachers to share that good practice. We look at where the challenges are. So as Anna said before, executive functioning, is it they have processing challenges and they need a little bit more time to think through a question before they provide their answers? We put all that in, and then we look at strategies. So how do we overcome those challenges? What can teachers do? What can the student do? What can the family do in order to get to where they need to be? We also look at things to avoid. Sorry, 1 second. We look at things to avoid. Okay. So what should a teacher not do? What's a trigger? So for example, children with ADHD, they don't like changes in the routines. So in there, it would say, avoid changing routines without preparation and preparing the student for that change. And then we document what access arrangements, what exam accommodations they may be entitled to. Thank you, Peter. So we do have an AEN register. So this is for students who may not have a diagnosis, but there are clear barriers to learning. So it could be that they are very hyperactive, attention seeking, may have processing and short-term memory difficulties, but they don't have a diagnosis. Just because they don't have a diagnosis doesn't mean that we're not going to support that person. We appreciate that psychology reports are very expensive, time consuming, so we're not just going to put that as a barrier. Another thing was somebody may be diagnosed with an additional need, but it's not affecting their learning. So we would add it to here. So you may have somebody with dyslexia that's really overcome their challenges, performing really well, but we would place them on the additional educational needs register as a monitoring sort of procedure to make sure they don't get left behind and that we are always ahead of the game monitoring their progress. Okay, next slide, please, Peter. We also have our medical register. So this is any students who are medicated ongoing. So we could have a student who has ADHD and is medicated. They would be on our SEND and medical register, just so we ensure we have all that information. Maybe somebody with severe eczema or a medical condition that is providing a challenge. So for instance, some medication may be making them drowsy, and they might present as a bit drowsy in the morning. So just again, we would let teachers know that so that teachers are prepared and act accordingly. So our gifted and talented register is really important. It is just as important as having an additional need. If a student is assessed as being gifted or talented and that gets ignored, students will fail to thrive. They will fail to achieve. They'll disengage. They need their curiosity stimulated. So it's really important that we flag those students who have a gift. So that's cognition, or a talent. So it might be somebody who's performing really highly in Taekwondo. We have a BMX champion with us that travels the world. You know, so there's lots of different things there. We do say that for gifted and talented, they must score over 130 in standardized cognition assessments. Now, we do get some psychology reports through that say child A scored 126, therefore they are gifted. For CGA, we say that it has to be over 130, because when you're saying somebody is gifted, it has to be on the average of your cohort, although we do take the advice from psychology reports. So they will be in the extremely high range. We may have a parent or peer nomination and say, I think, you know, my child or is gifted. How do I go about that? So it might be that we look at somebody who's performing really high in math. They've got the top mark. They haven't had a psychology assessment, but it is clear that they are way above their peers. So we would again look at the evidence and we can add them under that area. Sporting and creativity activities. So somebody again who's performing at that high level, you know, are they a great pianist? But we also look above and beyond cultural contributions. So is there somebody in, you know, a student who's working with local youth parliament or working with homeless people or volunteering in a hospital? Like, who is going above and beyond in their community or through cultural contributions? And then also equality and inclusion. Is there any students, are there any students that are providing support? So I have one student who is on our gifted and talented register because she is providing support for our neurodiverse students, and she has set up a neurodiverse community club, and other students learn, not just neurodiverse students, but children students are learning about neurodiversity. So she would be on our gifted and talented register because she has gone exceptionally above and beyond to support inclusion and equality within our school. So what does support look like? Okay, so it is about tailored learning materials. So when I do an individual education plan and learning needs to be differentiated, the materials need to be differentiated, I will support the teachers how that would look, just like in a physical school. So that will be through the IEP. So for example, I have a student with some processing challenges and they have all their materials sent before the lesson so that they can just listen to videos, read the materials prior to the lesson so the information isn't new. I have another student who's dyslexic and they have the key words ahead of time so they can rehearse them and learn their definitions. We also have strategies, for example, somebody with anxiety and depression. So the support might be, don't call that person out in class to answer a question. Ask them in the private chat, not the community chat, are they okay to answer that question? And they can do little emoji, thumbs up, thumbs down, so it's very easy to see. We have children with emotional needs who may just be having a bad day. They're feeling really overwhelmed. So the teacher will just privately, again, in that private chat, how are you today? And they just put thumbs up or thumbs down. If the thumbs down appears, the teacher just goes easy. They just provide the information. They don't expect much for that person, but they do check in on them later. So lots of different strategies. And again, it's not one size fits all. I meet with the families, the students, the teachers, and I will devise a plan that is individual to that child. So we're going to listen to Felix now. Felix is one of our success stories. So I don't need to tell you anything about him. He's going to do it himself and his journey with CGA.
CGA would support my learning style, probably just the way people work and want to learn. They're very good at allowing people to be able to go at it at their own pace, yet still arrive at the same point. Hi, my name's Felix. I'm 16 years old. I am a full-time student at CGA, and I live in Cooma, New South Wales, Australia.
Our decision to enrol Felix in CGA was an interesting one. Felix has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder level 1, and I knew Felix's issues were impacting his learning because he was being compromised with the social impact of going to a mainstream school, and his mental health was compromised and his grades were slipping.
We both wanted somewhere that he could be supported to be himself and achieve his goals.
I'm Justine McHugh, and this is my partner, Peter Allensbar. Since he's joined CGA, Felix's life has changed considerably. He's matured significantly and loves learning again. And he's got friends and is excited to attend his classes. He's just much happier in himself.
CGA's flexibility and support from the very start made the choice an easy one.
I've been attending CGA for probably about 1.25 years now. What I probably like most about it is the convenience, the hospitality. They're very empathetic and understanding for every student's needs and interests. And I also know from experience that I and many other kids at other schools experience a lot of bullying and other things that aren't good for any young kid. CGA is probably much better as it allows for people to get away from all that and just do school.
CGA has supported Felix's individual learning needs incredibly well, and the teachers have all been very open to sending him previews of why they are planning the lesson plans in the way that they are. And he's also a very visual learner, so being online, that works.
And they've actually learnt ways to help him as well, which has been great. They listened and actioned our suggestions and made us feel part of their team.
For me, removing the social impact of mainstream school was an obvious answer, but Pete took a little bit more convincing.
It was quite a foreign concept to me. I was worried about the isolation and didn't want him to lose social skills and those other opportunities. So we came up with a plan for him to work as well to combat those problems, and he was very motivated and had a job within a few days.
I've always loved earning and having my own income and having my own thing to do.
He's got the direction and a pathway to get where he wants to go, which he never had before. He's also working and earning his own money and developing his people skills through this.
When you're at an Alliance school, there's people from Australia and then there's people from Jordan on the other side of the world. It's allowed me to understand people better, be able to think a bit more critically about things. It's expanded my views on things. And I feel like anyone would appreciate that in life.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on something that Felix said, in a very articulate way, that I would say that one of our goals as parents, as teachers, as educators, is that we want to raise global citizens. You know, we want children to grow into young people and adults that understand the world around them. And when you go to a physical school in your local community, you tend to just stay with people like yourself, or cultures that you have, or languages that you have. And CGA, I watched, we did an awards ceremony, and I was actually taken aback by a group of students from all different countries of the world. There were 5 students, and they're a band. They've created a band, and there was this performance, and I couldn't understand how they'd done it, and they were so harmonious together, and they were all different nationalities, different languages, different interests, but they came together through music, and I just thought it was exceptional. So please bear that in mind, because I think it's definitely a strength. And Felix has done well because of his motivation, his family support, and as the family said there, us learning with Felix. Because I met with a young person this morning, and when I read his psychology report, if I'm honest, I didn't know quite how I was going to develop his IEP to make sure the strategies would work in class. But meeting with the family, meeting with the student, we've come up with a great learning plan that I'm sure will help him get where he wants. So again, we're learning through meeting new students all the time as well. So over to you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you, Jane. And I was actually very fortunate enough to meet Felix and his parents about 3 years ago, at the very beginning of their CGA journey, understanding, the challenges they face, their needs. And as you can probably tell, our admissions process here at CGA is very personalized. We meet every single student and parent before they enroll. And once, they share their needs with me, then the next step would be to schedule, a second meeting with Jane, our inclusion manager. So if you would like to, speak to us, we have consultations in both English and Mandarin, and would be happy to contact you to schedule that in for you. And while we wait for the poll results for this one, Jane, we do have a question from the audience. It's about a student. Yeah, are you ready? So it's about a student who's gifted with ADHD, struggling a lot in writing, but super good in reading. And I know that, we do attract voracious readers, right? Who may actually be surprisingly struggling with English as an academic subject at school, perhaps. And it also says here that, teens are addicted to online gaming and YouTube these days, lacking self-control and self-discipline. How does an online school like CJ support such students?
So first of all, I couldn't give a generic answer. So the first thing I would do is I would meet with the family and the student, and we would look at what strengths and areas of interest and hobbies, because to me that's the first thing, is engaging somebody in the learning process. Secondly, we'd ask what their challenges are, which you said about having ADHD, inattention, hyperactivity. Writing is a challenge. Quite a few children with ADHD do have specific learning difficulties as well. So maybe they have dysgraphia, but even without a diagnosis, we would find interesting ways that a student can provide their knowledge, answers, in a way that's not in a writing form. Yes, in English, they have to develop their writing skills, but if you're in history, do you have to write it down? Could you draw a cartoon strip to look at the Civil War, for example, and what happened in the timeline? Could you do a voice recording for your homework and send it in? So there's lots of different ways you can engage and find out somebody's knowledge and skills without having to be written. We also look at typing. So exams, classwork can be done typed on a word processor. Lots of our young people prefer to be on a keyboard these days. We have to be mindful that you still need to look at handwriting and developing that. And with the gifted and talented, a lot of students with ADHD who are gifted and talented get bored quickly. So if they're not stretched and challenged, then their inattention becomes even more. So to me, again, that's equally as important. The main thing is we would sit together, look at a plan that works. Then I would deliver that to staff. There'll be things that work and there'll be things that don't work. So then we would review. And then we change things in our individual education plan. We have quite a high number of children with ADHD and ASD that are performing very well. It might be that they have to stand up from their chair and have rest breaks, so they're still listening. My grandson, for example, he never looks at the screen. He's always doing something else, but you ask him a question about what was just delivered and he knows it straight away. So it might be they need to stand up and have movement breaks. It may be that tasks have to be broken down into small chunks with like a little to-do list, maybe like a points challenge, as if it's a game. I designed this lesson not long ago where it was an algebra lesson. No, it wasn't. It was an angles lesson. It was parallel lines. And this student, ADHD and autism, just wouldn't engage. The teacher said to me, how do we get around this? I said, well, he's a gamer. Does he like Roblox? Does he like this? Does he like that? And I did this game where it was like freeing Donkey Kong, and Steve had to rescue Donkey Kong. And as they went through the maze, they had to solve the angle to get to the next step. And he did it quicker than anybody else in the class, because it's just about finding out how they work and spending time. I watch a lot of the videos of the recordings of lessons, and I will like advise teachers, because more than anything, I'm the child's advocate. So if there's something, you know, a teacher does that hasn't worked or it's triggered something, it's my job to stand there for the child and say, look, this didn't work, let's try it this way. I hope that answers it.
For sure, I couldn't agree more. And as a parent, I'd be asking, is my child in the right curriculum? Are they in the right classroom? Are they being sufficiently challenged, right? We actually have a few more questions from the audience that I think we can just tackle now. I think the first one is about career guidance. So traditional schools in Taiwan, they don't offer much career development guidance. I think there's two things that CJ does really, really well. The first one is exposure. And the second one is expert advising. So across our two pathways, because we don't just have one curriculum, we've got the British pathway and the US pathway. We offer more than 100 different courses, ranging from your traditional, English, math, sciences to really interesting real life applicable courses. Courses like AI to graphics design to entrepreneurship to even things like blockchain, right? So I think offering students the widest variety of courses really, really helps. And if I can just skip to, something that we've prepared as an online school, we offer more than 26 different career-related clubs. And these are really designed to expose students to university majors and career pathways before they finish high school, right? Because, for example, studying a subject like economics, it can be quite theoretical and lack real life application to the jobs and pathways that may result from it, right? So we organize things like career fairs where we invite guest speakers from all around the world who are already working in fields. We have a very strong alumni network. So students who graduate from CGA who have started doing internships or have started work who can share perspectives, right? And really the second part is our team of advisors. So including, admission staff like myself, and our college counseling team. And this process doesn't start at the end of high school, as they often do at traditional schools. Even a grade 6 or a grade 8 student can schedule a meeting with their careers counselor or college counselor to start exploring their interest and receive recommendations, right? So especially, for students with ADHD, as Jane mentioned, they can get bored quite easily. And our job is to, challenge them and give them enough opportunities to latch onto their interests so that they can develop them, okay? Another question is, will choosing your online courses help me with applying to international universities during college? So one trend that we see at CGA is students are applying to not just one country, but multiple countries, with the most popular ones being the US, UK, followed by Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and also in Asia as well. And every single year since we started our school, our students are getting into Ivy League institutions, Oxford and Cambridge, Russell Group universities in the UK, as well as leading universities across Europe, ANZ, medicine programs as well, right? So the answer is definitely yes, because our transcripts and qualifications are very, very well recognized. Okay. Will the school recognize activities the student is involved in outside of CGA? Yep, the answer is also definitely yes. And often, the students who have the most enriching, fulfilling lives after joining are students like Felix, who, together with our admissions team, have a plan to maximize the time that they're going to save by not attending a physical school, right? So things like hobbies, they might be taking online courses, they might be involved in sports and music in their communities. They might have plans to travel as a family to gain precious life experiences, right? And we as a school, we not only encourage that, we actually help organize some of our own. So every year we're organizing in-person student meetups, and we have some coming up in September. So after our September intake commences, it's really a good time for us to connect our families together. So we'll have one in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. In addition, we organize school trips all around the world, given our global network. So in the past, we've done places like New Zealand, Vietnam, Australia, UK, US. Next year, we're being really ambitious, and we're trying to organize a school trip to Tanzania, which is really wild. And again, these are optional. because something else that we believe as a school is socialization on your own terms, right? So students can really pick and choose friends and classmates who share similar interests and personalities as them, rather than them, being forced in a physical setting, having to interact with those that, might not be as like-minded. Okay, how we're doing for time? Okay, we've got about 2 more minutes. Just gonna check the Q&A once more.
While you're just doing that, Peter, in my
Sure.
true neurodiverse brain, when I finish talking, something pops into my head. I forgot to mention when I was answering the other question earlier, and it links to something that Anna said before about the executive functioning coach. That's something we've started over the last few weeks. So, for example, I met with a student this morning who's got forthcoming exams, has ADHD, executive functioning is his major challenge. And we helped to organise his time. It was on a one-to-one with myself. And together we looked at mind maps, graphic organisers, making sure his revision timetable wasn't, too pressured, whether he, making sure he had time for that relaxation in there as well, making sure he was revising in the right way. So that's something we've started, and if it's important to the family and the student, it's something that we're offering in groups later on as well.
For sure. Thank you, Jane. We had prepared a few more things, but if you would like to schedule, a meeting with us, please do so, particularly in the next week, as our classes for September. Let me bring up those dates. For the British pathway, they'll be commencing in the first week of September, and for the US pathway, the second week of September. We do accept transfer enrollments, so we get families who, maybe their child returns to their previous school, and nothing has really changed, right? So we do accept transfer enrollments after classes commence. And being a 2-campus school, our next intake will start in February for students mostly based in Australia and New Zealand. All right. So thank you everyone tonight for joining us today. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Jane. I can really feel your passion every time we do this. I'm sure the families appreciate it too. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll be in touch with those who requested the consultation.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. I hope to speak to you in person soon. I'm here to support you. Just questions you may have after this webinar, please get in touch through the methods that Peter has suggested, and I'll speak to you all soon.